we now do hashtags for the forums as well, and so sometimes it's kind of fun seeing what the audience thinks. So we want to encourage you to participate in forum activities, no matter where you are. There's greater discussions, as you would remember, and we're looking forward to an exciting fall. But today, we've got an outstanding panel of political folks to talk about the presidential race. And as always, we're going to invite all of you, not all of you, some of you, to participate in the conversation as well when we open it up for question and answers. I'm going to do a quick intros. You have more detailed bios in your program, as well as the insert for our last panel edition. But to my immediate left is Stephanie Cutter. Stephanie is the Deputy Campaign Manager for Obama-Biden 2012, has been an advisor to the President in the White House, in the campaign. In the 2008 campaign, she was Chief of Staff to Michelle Obama. She also, we like to brag about her, she was a 2009 IOP Fellow, and she's local here. So she's going to get to see her mom for Mother's Day weekend. She's a Massachusetts girl. So please join me in welcoming Stephanie. To Stephanie's left, which is only a directional purposes for the stage and not on an ideological chart, is one of you. Fergus Cullen is an alum of the Kennedy School, was the former chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party during the 2008 presidential cycle, is a commentator, consultant. He's here actually on his own. The Romney campaign today, we reached out to a bunch of folks. They actually were interested. They weren't afraid of coming here or taking on Stephanie. At least that's what they said. They seemed fairly believable with their regrets. But today, for example, the communications team for the campaign is having an all-day meeting with the RNC communication team, and a lot of other people are out of town. So we really appreciate that Fergus is here, but I want to make it clear, Fergus is representing his own views. He actually voted for Huntsman in the primary, but is for Romney now. So he'll be, if he says something critical about Romney, don't think, oh, the Romney guy said the Romney campaign was doing X. It's Fergus saying it. But so please join me in welcoming Fergus. Whoa. Don't feel big. So that's where the tough questions are going to come from Fergus, that little section right there. To Fergus's left, Lynn, also a former IOP Fellow in 2004, is the Washington Bureau Chief for the Chicago Sun-Times, one of the best political reporters in the country. And she's had the good fortune of covering President Obama when he was Citizen Obama, Senator Obama, State Senator Obama, and has just some great insights. So we're really pleased to have Lynn with us as well. She was one of our best fellows, so please welcome Lynn. And to Lynn's left is Glen Johnson. Glen is the politics editor for Boston.com, which is a website which is was originally the Boston Globe's website before they peeled off and started their own, but covers a lot of other things in the greater the Metro Boston area. He also writes a column that's called the Political Intelligence column, and that appears, a Sunday version of that appears in the Globe. Has covered Mitt Romney for many years, worked for the Globe and other news outlets in Washington, up here, and is, again, one of the best journalists in the country. So please join me in welcoming Glen. What I thought I'd begin with, and actually transition a bit from my observation about how it was difficult to get somebody from the Romney campaign coming because they had all these organizational meetings today. And for that, we apologize. We really thought we could have somebody here. But it brings up one of the challenges that campaigns face, especially the challengers face to an incumbent presidential campaign. I mean, President Obama has been the president for 4 years, was running for president for a year and a half before that officially, and has basically ran unopposed. I mean, the guy in West Virginia with the squirrel tail thing, we're not really going to, he's not really, I mean, he's running, but he's not really running. This is not like a Buchanan or a Kennedy insurgency. So they've been able to focus on the general and build a really strong organization, but the Romney campaign's having to catch up. And I know Lynn and I were talking about this yesterday. Lynn, you visited both headquarters recently. Let's talk about that transition and that difficulty and the challenge that faces, maybe the advantages it gives to the Obama folks, and we'll let everybody dive in on this one.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you for having me back. It's great to be back in the forum. It's just wonderful to be here, and this is a great topic. So, let me tell you the challenge that Mitt Romney, just a few miles away from here, and his building on the river has to deal with compared to where the Obama people are. The Obama operation in Chicago has been up and running for more than a year. It is massive. It is staffed. There are hundreds of people there. There are hundreds of people out in state offices. Add to that the White House operation working in concert with the campaign. Add to that the Democratic National Committee working in concert campaign. And to that the people working on the convention in North Carolina are all working in concert with the campaign. So the sprawling Obama operation has bones, strong infrastructure. You go a few miles away, the Romney people are just expanding now. Now, I don't know if this is going to be determinative in November, but it shows that Stephanie has the advantage, as she always has, of time. And when you have time in politics, you can correct, you can change, you could switch, you could pivot, you can assess, you could survey. That's the gift of time. Romney it's very visual. I went in there and there are guys pulling cable in order to set up the phones, the TVs, and they have desks set up. So they're building out. They had 87 people on their staff up until recently during the primary. Chicago alone has been staffed up with hundreds of people for months. When I go into Chicago, by the way, it looks sometimes to me like a big student union because of the informality. You know, there's a culture there, the ping pong table on it. I didn't quite get that vibe yet from the Mitt Romney campaign because it just hasn't been staffed up. I'm sure their culture will come through too. I saw basketball net, and they have something I don't think you have, Stephanie, a popcorn machine.
We do not.
Okay. So let me just say that the advantage has to go to an incumbent president because of the infrastructure, and that's important because he has massive website activity going on BarackObama.com, WhiteHouse.com. Every agency of the government has massive stuff going on about the incumbent's agenda, programs, and accomplishments. That's a heck of a lot of communication you could do officially with your government business and politically. So Romney has a very, very quick time now to get staffed up and ready to go. Again, will this be determinative? Too soon to say, but that's where we're at in the beginning weeks of the general election.
Great. Fergus, you made a comparison when we were talking in the green room to 4 years ago, how different it was with the McCain operation.
Yeah, I mean, I live in New Hampshire. I was 4 years ago a state Republican Party chairman in an allegedly swing state, one that President Obama ended up carrying by 9 points. John Kerry, by the way, had carried New Hampshire by 1 point in 2004, and George W. Bush had carried New Hampshire by 1 point in 2000. So until the last election, New Hampshire was very competitive. And at this point, 4 years ago, the McCain campaign was like on vacation. I mean, you know, we're saying, hey, we're ready to go. What should we be doing? What should we be getting ready? And they were like, well, sit tight, we're getting ready, we're getting organized. Months went by while the Obama and Clinton campaigns were still, fighting very hard, and John McCain was already the presumptive nominee. That really didn't change until around August 1st. And you know, I'm not active with the campaign, but I'm an observer. I write an editorial page column with the New Hampshire Union Leader. The Obama campaign already has something like 7 or 8 local offices with paid staff in New Hampshire, which is, again, I'm sure it's the same in swing states across the country. My town of Dover, which is about 30,000 people, has one. I don't know what these folks are doing for you, Stephanie, all day, but
hopefully she'll tell us exactly what they're doing.
But it, I sort of look at this, and my concern is, well, will Team Democrat, Team Left really out-organize and out-hustle Team Right? I do see the party, the right, coming together quite quickly behind Mitt Romney, so I think that'll take care of itself in the coming months.
Glenn, you've been observing both these campaigns from a close distance. What's your take on where they stand? And we'll come back to let Stephanie have the final word on this topic.
The first thing I want to do is I want to warn all you, do not follow Lynn's advice and go to whitehouse.com. It's a pornography site. You want to learn about the president, go to whitehouse.gov.
Sorry.
We're just trying to wake y'all up. It is,
now we know what Lynn's been doing.
Yeah. She's got it bookmarked. I see this right now. You know, this is the 5th campaign I've covered, and I've seen this transition through each of them. And right now, the president or the governor is making this transition from nominee to, from candidate in the primary to the party's nominee. And as he does so, this is a multi-dimensional task. He not only has to completely expand and amplify his fundraising effort, but he's also now taking control of the Republican National Committee. He's taking control of the Republican Convention down in Tampa. And fortunately for him, though, there's been a lot of loyalists, maybe not to him personally, but obviously to the party, in position running all these operations already. And as he grabs this nomination early enough in the year, there's really not a tremendous public interest in the campaign like there will be in the fall. So he has time right now to make this transition, and you can see it in his schedule. Out of a 5-day work week, he's starting to take weekends off right now. He's spending 2 days fundraising, he's spending 2 days on the trail, and he's spending 1 day in the office. Right now, as we speak here, he's down at Liberty University in Virginia, and he's delivering the commencement address. He'll take tomorrow and Monday off. Monday, I'm sure he'll be in the office over in the North End, and then he heads back out on the road. And so they have this period now where they can both regroup physically and mentally, but they also have enough infrastructure in place right now, financially, with the support of super PACs, to kind of cover them while they get their own operation transitioned over to a general election mode, that they're actually, I would feel like, in a pretty good position right now. They've had tremendous outside support through this whole campaign. It's actually been much deeper and richer than the Democrats have had. And so while he doesn't have the advantage of the incumbency and he doesn't have the advantage of the time that the Democrats have had, he's had a lot of other players there ready to assist him, and now they are transitioning to that role. Stephanie?
Well, it is correct to say that an incumbent has significant advantages in terms of time and planning and financial resources than a challenger does. I've been on both sides of it. In 2004, I worked for John Kerry as he won the nomination, and about this time, 8 years ago, we were coming out of a similar primary battle, which was pretty brutal, and we were exhausted. We were out of money. We didn't have a ground game, because you can't think past the next 3 weeks when you're in a primary battle like that to think about what type of ground game you need in the next 6 months. You can rely on your party to build that stuff, but unless you're building a on-the-ground apparatus for a candidate, it's very hard to get volunteers and get people to come out and knock on doors and really to build that ground game. So 4 years ago, the Obama campaign was also coming out of a brutal primary. But throughout that primary process, they kept their ground game, or we kept our ground game in place in all of the battleground states where we had tough primaries. And we continued to build on that. And obviously, it was the first real test of internet fundraising, and that really took off for the Obama campaign, which helped us tremendously as we transitioned from the primary into the general. That organization that we built 4 years ago never went away throughout the past 3.5 years as the president was trying to be president. It stayed intact, and we continue to build on it. So we do have operations in all 50 states. Now, clearly, the presidential campaign is not going to be fought in all 50 states. It's really boiled down to 9 states, including Fergus's state. But in those states, we have multiple campaign offices. In fact, we took over Romney's primary campaign office in New Hampshire, which he put up for rent after that primary is over.
That must have been a fun lease to sign. Yeah.
So, that is a significant advantage. The campaigns are won on the air and they're won on the ground. So our ground game is up and running. We're going to continue to build on it. Every weekend, there's a weekend of action where we're getting more and more volunteers. We're registering people to vote. We're hiring new neighborhood team leaders who, it's that concentric circle that continues to build. Those circles are being created all the time. I have to say also there are disadvantages to being an incumbent. The economy, will continue to be a challenge as we continue to fight out this race over the next 6 months. The economy that we inherited when we came into office, everybody is familiar with the story. We were losing up to 800,000 jobs a month when we came into office. The president has been able to turn that around. But while we've turned it around, we've created now 4.2 million jobs over the past 26 months, we still have a long way to go to recover from the worst recession in our lifetimes. Well, Romney doesn't have that to defend. He has that to attack on. Now, there are obviously some things in Romney's record that we'll attack on as well, including his Massachusetts record and what he did to the economy here. But that is one disadvantage that I would point to from being an incumbent also.
Let's maybe pivot a little bit to messaging. I mean, your area, one of the areas that you work with is the communications and the messaging. We've seen a lot of emphasis, it seems, at least from an observer standpoint, in the last couple of weeks on trying to address issues that young voters might care about. There's been a lot of talk about the student loan extension. The president's fighting for that in his official capacity and has talked about that in the political capacity. How big of a role is keeping those young voters engaged and supportive like they were in 2008? I mean, it was extraordinary, the resonance that President Obama found among young voters, both in the primary and in the general election.
Well, it is a priority for the campaign. Young voters are a key voting bloc for President Obama. Young voters, there are millions voting for the first time in this election. So the challenge is to make sure they come out and register to vote and vote, but also those that voted 4 years ago to come back and vote again at the same enthusiasm rates as we saw 4 years ago. Even from Harvard.
There may have been a reason why I asked that question.
Yes.
With the IOP, we have a millennial survey that came out a few weeks ago.
And things are looking okay.
Yeah, you have showed a lot of progress from the last poll.
Yes. And I think that, I'd be interested to hear from many in this audience, but I think that young people are starting to tune into this campaign. And whether it's the gay marriage announcement this past week, or ending the war in Iraq and drawing down the war in Afghanistan, or the president fighting for student loans to make sure that student loan interest rates don't double, because by law they double on July 1st. And Congress is sitting on its hands, not doing anything about it. So that's why the president has been out there talking about student loans. We know that, I'm still paying my student loans. And
probably a lot of people in this audience paying student loans. Students graduating today face a significant burden. People owe more on student loans now than they do on credit card debt. So if that interest rate doubles, that has a significant impact on young graduates coming out of school and what types of jobs they can take, the choices that really set them on the course of their careers and their lives. So the president wants to keep that rate low so they have those choices available to them. One of the things our survey showed was that just like in the primaries, that Governor Romney struggles to get even young Republicans to his side. Even the survey was done in late March. Even at that point when the race was essentially over, Ron Paul was doing better among young voters in our primary. Fergus, from maybe a New Hampshire standpoint, Glen, Lynn, please feel free to weigh in. Can Romney narrow that gap? And young voters are going to be for the Democratic nominee, but for Romney to win, he probably needs to have his performance be more like George W. Bush's was in 2004 relative to John Kerry than John McCain. And can he do that, and how will he do that? This seems like it's going to be, I think, a recurring theme of the campaigns, both in targeting as well as the attention focused as these millennial voters come of age and vote. What do you guys think?
I think that we are so into micro-targeting that you tell me somebody who doesn't fit into some niche, and that person must live on Mars. Okay? And Stephanie, you know all your analytics and data. We talk about the youth vote, the women vote, the gay vote, the Jewish vote. I think this is so sliced and diced that everyone's a target, because you can.
Sounds so.
Is that because of the narrowness of the light? Is that because you think because we're so closely divided as a country?
No.
And no?
No,
or just
it's
because
because you have technology to do it.
Because you can
this
do it
has
now.
nothing to do with it. The reason you would do direct mail, in the early days, they would say, here's a piece for women. Why? Because they could figure out from a name. Before you, or maybe then you realize, well, we have enough field people. We know who said they were in a union household or who went to an evangelical church. Then years ago, someone said we could get a mailing list from the church or the union or Hadassah, I don't know, and then you figure out who you start doing wherever. When campaigns realized you could merge marketing and political stuff. Now, because the cost per person in political communication is so low, if you figure out a way, if you find them. One of the things the campaigns do all the time is constantly asking you questions on their website and your emails that they want you to respond to. Take a survey, do this, sign up for this. Are you for us? Part of it is they're constantly testing to see what will make you respond. And then that will also determine what you hear. So frankly, yes, the youth, obviously you cannot ignore the traditional major blocks where you may communicate in fairly traditional ways. But I think if we're boiling this campaign down to these swing states, I think they will be, no one can take a chance in this campaign, and you will have big, brawny campaigns on both sides that are saying, well, maybe if I think I'm wobbly with this group, I could shore up with that group. I think it's going to be a constant work in progress.
But, I mean, what's interesting, though, is if you then take a step back, even with all that, even with the targeting and everything that goes on, doesn't, as Stephanie alluded to, doesn't the economy play maybe the over...
Absolutely.
To go back to 1992, is the economy stupid? I mean, that may, even with all the micro-targeting, be the biggest role in this campaign. Glenn,
That's the way the governor targets and frames all of his arguments. I mean, you look at this past week, and the president talked about his conversion on gay marriage, and he put it in the context of conversations he had with his own children and conversations that he had with his wife, and he talked about it in the context of his faith. And then everybody went to Mitt Romney, and he said, well, I'm still against gay marriage, and how about the economy? Mm-hmm. And his outreach to young voters is through the lens of the economy. He argues that if you're worried about student loans, if you're worried about getting a job, elect somebody that can fix the economy. It's not so much a youth-oriented appeal in terms of, I'll get a new swing set here, or I'll, put a skate park there. It's that when you get out of Harvard, if you want to have a job, vote for me.
Yeah, and the president, yeah.
So just one point on that. I agree, Glenn. He does frame his arguments that way. But he also has, and sorry, my campaign mode is clicking on now.
Okay. Well, we want your paycheck to be received this week, so that's good.
Get this trip paid for.
Yeah.
The governor also has missteps with young people, where he does frame his arguments about the economy, but he doesn't relate to young people in economic terms that they want to receive this information. For instance, on student loans, which it is a predominant issue with young kids. Either they're paying them or they're about to start paying them. And his answer to someone who asked a question, what do I do about my student debt? He said, go shop around. If you want a good loan rate, go shop around. Really? Or go take a loan from your parents.
I do have to jump in on this a little bit. I mean,
Fergus isn't getting paid, but he feels obligated. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, two weeks ago, I know Glenn was there. I don't know if Lynn was there. But on the night of the Pennsylvania primary, Governor Romney was in New Hampshire to do a sort of relaunch, and he said specifically, it's still about the economy, and we're not stupid. The president promised us that if only we passed the stimulus plan, the unemployment rate would never go above 8%. And
that's not true, by the way.
Sure it is.
It's not true.
And
Independent fact checkers, including in your own state, have said that's not true.
And Stephanie is here 3.5 years after the president's election, still pointing the finger at George Bush. I mean, come on, isn't there a statute of limitations on that?
Well, we're about to break.
At what point?
Not for these folks.
It's always nice. It's always nice to have a chance to talk to an undecided swing audience.
And maybe this is why nobody wanted to come from the Romney campaign.
And on student loans, the president really would be doing a greater service to young people if he was encouraging more of them to think very carefully about whether that degree is worth going into debt, whether there are other choices, instead of saying you're entitled to get it at a lower interest rate. He would serve more people better if he took that message instead.
How many people in this audience relied on student loans to go to college? Were you entitled to it, or was it part of how hard you worked to get to college and busting your butt while you were in college and then paying those loans back after college through hard work and making some tough choices in your career, right? So there is no entitlement to it, but it is a critical component to building an economy that's built to last. Our college graduation rate under George Bush, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to go back to George Bush, but he is still relevant because Mitt Romney actually wants to take us back to those same policies, so we need to start thinking about them. Our college graduation rate plummeted at the end of the Bush administration. We used to be #1. We're now below China and India and so many other countries, and that hurts our economy. That hurts our competitiveness. That's just common sense. So the president set a goal that by 2020, we're going to be back on top again. We're going to be number one again. Even in the midst of the worst economic recession, and Fergus, you have to admit, it was pretty bad when we took office and were handed the set of keys.
Still is.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Well, I don't want to get off course, but I'll come back to that in a second. So there is no entitlement to it. In terms of whether the president should encourage people to go into different careers, that's precisely what he's doing. He's giving people options. You know, that's why he doubled funding for community colleges, because we know that is people who are looking for second careers, maybe they got laid off and want to go back and get some job training to start a new career, they go to a community college. That's what builds that strong working class of America. Or manufacturing. You know, manufacturing basically went into non-existence in many states whose economies were solely reliant on manufacturing for so many years. You know, the president, for the first time in 2 decades, our manufacturing is on an increase. Jobs are coming back to this country. Good manufacturing jobs that pay higher wages, that really build communities, are coming back to this country for the first time in 2 decades. What did Mitt Romney say to the president, encouraging people to go into manufacturing? He made fun of him. He made fun of young people wanting to go into manufacturing. And I think, Fergus, that's the type of job that you're talking about if you don't want to go get a college degree.
Stephanie, you have an iPhone, right? You ever looked on the back of your iPhone? It says, designed and engineered in California, manufactured in China. Is that a bad thing?
Is that a bad thing? No, but wouldn't you love for that to be manufactured here? And to do that, you have to create a set of policies to encourage companies to locate back here. Now, the reason they're manufactured over in China is because we did have a set of policies that encouraged low-wage jobs to move overseas. And that's why they're over there.
Stephanie's against Steve Jobs.
Now, you know, Fergus, that's not what I'm saying. But I do think it would be a lot better if we were creating those jobs here. Why wouldn't we want Americans creating American products? And that's precisely the policies that the president has been putting in place.
Fergus, do you want to respond to that, or you want us to move on? Okay. We're really lucky that both Glenn and Lynn over the years have seen the 2 presidential candidates from up close and personal. And one of the things I wanted to do before we opened up the questions was to ask each of them, you know, we observe the president and the governor from a distance. Stephanie, obviously, from much closer with President Obama and has worked with them. But you've seen them grow, evolve. Tell us something we don't know, or tell us something that you've seen that maybe your readers in your hometowns might know, but that we as folks who didn't grow up in Chicago or Boston wouldn't know about these 2 gentlemen.
Let me tell you the moment when I realized he really was going to run for president. And it was 2006, and we were in Kenya, and he was given a treatment as if he were a head of state. Now, in this time in 2006, it was the Africa trip came just a little bit before his book came out, Audacity of Hope, and I knew that the elements were in place. There was already talk that maybe you know, maybe I'll run, maybe not, but it was kind of at this level. But I knew that we had Africa, then the book tour, which could be a kind of a dry run exploratory for presidential. I knew he had a lot of power to raise money for other people that he understood, as his other advisors did. If he could do this for others, he could do it for himself. And when he was treated as a head of state on his arrival in Kenya, when we were in South Africa, he couldn't get a meeting with the president because of stuff. As soon as we got there, and I just saw the motorcade, the treatment, the crowds, the interest, I thought, this is what it will, this is going to happen.
Preview, yeah.
I just thought, this is going to happen. It will never get any better. And I knew, I bought into and agree with the theory that more years in the Senate doesn't help. It's just hundreds of more votes for people to attack.
Go back to Kerry days.
In a campaign, it's nice to say, I passed 5 bills. That's good. It's worse to have 200 votes that these 2 could take apart amendment by amendment.
Ask Dick Lugar.
And strangle you with. So I kind of knew what was there, and then it just kind of hit me, this is real. So we were at Desmond, and just a week or 2 before when we were in South Africa, Desmond Tutu met with Obama, and he teased him about running for president. And Obama was very humble. He kind of said the equivalent of, "Oh, shucks, you know, not me." He says, and Tutu says, "You can't tell. He's blushing."
Glenn.
Well, when people ask me about Mitt Romney, you should all take great pride in this. What's he like? What's the one thing about him that we haven't really heard? I always tell them the story about that he went to Harvard and he got not just one degree, but two at the same time, and that generally impresses everybody that I tell. I'm not sure that will impress all you as much. I think there is some legitimacy to him as a family man. I've seen him in private times with his family. I remember vividly one trip that we made in 2008 where we went from California back to West Virginia, back to California, and then back to West Virginia for the primary. And when we got to Long Beach for a late night rally and before we made a red-eye flight back, it was pretty clear that he was going to lose the nomination, but he had some of his grandkids there. And to watch the way he interacted with them and the comfort that he took from them at the end of this brutal stretch of campaigning just made it very clear that this whole talk about him as a family man is not just campaign PR, but is pretty legitimate. In terms of the business record, we'll hear about that all through the year. There's the stories, and they've already cut an ad about it, about him suspending operations at work and using his company resources to go out and look for the missing daughter of one of his co-workers. But the one story that sometimes will make people laugh about him is, and this kind of gets a little bit into his decision-making and some of the rhetoric that we heard this week. He took his family one time out to part just west of here to go boating. And a ranger came up to him and told him that he couldn't put his boat in the water, that it was prohibited there. And Romney asked how much the fine was if he did it. And the guy said, $50. And so he put his boat in the water. He said, "I can pay that fine." Well, he got arrested for it. And so it got a little bit into, there's that calculation that goes right on, cost benefit. And for him to have his family out on the boat was worth the fine. It was not worth him being hauled off in handcuffs, but that gives you a little window into his decision making and the primacy that he gives to his family life.
Great. Well, that's an interesting reaction to the fine from the audience here. Well, I want to introduce one last topic, and then we'll do the questions from the audience. I promised Paige Ennis that I would ask a question about the fact that we're not only electing a commander-in-chief, chief steward of the economy might be an exaggeration of the president's actual power of the economy, but somebody who deals with domestic issues. But we're also electing somebody who is whose worldview on international issues is going to affect how he runs the country and interacts with other countries. The president's obviously been doing this for 4 years. Let's talk a little bit about his record and what he maybe hopes to accomplish in the second term as far as international arena. And Stephanie, I'll give the caveat. Since she represents the campaign, isn't going to be giving a Hillary Clinton type answer to this question. So.
I can't. Sorry. In many ways, I can't. I think that the president made a series of promises when he was running for president, that he would do a number of different things differently than George Bush if he became president. And I think by any measure, those things have become true. We've ended the war in Iraq in a responsible way. We're drawing down the war in Afghanistan in a responsible way. We broke the back of the Taliban. We broke the back of Al-Qaeda. We got bin Laden. And we've restored our alliances throughout the world, and we have restored America's prominence throughout the world, really by any measure. There are still challenges. There are, whether it's Libya or what's happening in Syria, that will continue to be challenges moving forward. But the president's approach has put America back in the place where it should be around the globe. One where it's respected and continues to lead. So, what happens in the second term?
You'll have more flexibility, remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, against our greatest foe, Russia. Right?
Right.
Wait, y'all, there's actually, in today's New York Times, there's actually a really interesting article about why he believes that to be the case, and that's kind of, it's an interesting look into to Governor Romney's foreign policy views. Lynn, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to say, if you want to see the full display of Obama and his role in international diplomacy, it will be on display at the end of the week with the NATO summit in the United States in Chicago. You have a gathering of the world's mightiest military and political alliance coming to talk about the details of withdrawing from Afghanistan, centerpiece of the Obama promise to bring troops back home. So since this is an audience that has that bigger picture, you'll see the pageantry, the diplomacy, and everything that goes with it, in the United States in just a few days.
Fergus, Republicans have been complimentary of some of the president's foreign policy and international actions. I think the surge in Afghanistan was pretty popular among many Republicans. And the president's decision to continue a lot of the practices in the war on terror, actually reversing some of the stuff he said in the campaign, has also been popular among Republicans. But there's been some criticisms. From your vantage point, how do you think a Romney administration might differ from an Obama administration over the next 4 years, if that were to happen?
I mean, I do think, Stephanie just took credit for continuing the effort, the national effort against Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. And I just disagree with the idea that this is partisan in nature or that is only a fight that's been carried on by one administration and that would not be continued by another administration of either party either. I really disagree with that premise. I do think that there's some hopeless naivete in the president's foreign policy. I have a hard time believing that Vladimir Putin and others take this administration all that seriously and its threats. There's certainly a feeling, I think, that they can wait them out. And I think that's definitely a foreign policy concern that many on the right have when they look at this administration's policies. The president 4 years ago had this great advantage of people projecting onto him almost whatever they wanted to see. If you were concerned about the war in the Middle East, he would end it. If you were concerned about Gitmo, he would close it. Neither of those things, of course, have happened, I think, the way many of his supporters expected them to 4 years ago. And I think that's part of why there's generally less enthusiasm, even among Democrats, for President Obama today than there was 4 years ago.
Now's the time to invite all of you to come up. There are 4 microphones, 2 on the floor, 2 in the boxes, same spots as always. Same rules apply. Please identify yourself. We know you're alum. Most all of you are alums, but if you're an alum, tell us what class you're. The questions need to be brief, end in a question mark. God bless you. Do not contain a speech in the middle, followed by do you agree? I did hear that yesterday y'all were not on your best behavior and asking short, concise questions that ended in a question mark. I know on Saturday morning you're going to be on your best behavior, and there's a lot of people who want to ask questions, and there's nobody at this mic. So for those who are lining up here and here, there's a short, non-existent line up there. Why don't we start over here with this gentleman, and then we'll work our way around.
Good morning, Fergus.
Hey, Omar.
Before I ask my question, I want to...
Mike.
Talk loud.
Ma'am. Ma'am, I got it. He's got to ask this question.
Testing? Yeah? Okay. Good morning, Fergus. Before I ask my question...
No.
It's very short, very short. I just want
Omar,
to...
you're going first, man.
No.
You're going first.
My question's coming. It's very quick. I just want you to know how proud the class of 02 is of you.
All right.
If you were here in 02, you would know I always do this. Secondly, my question is, Ms. Lynn mentioned about a statement concerning the slicing and dicing of the voter groups in America. And one group that has stayed rather unsliced is the black voters. Back in the 50s, my parents were Republicans, and they remained that way up until the 70s, and with the exception of voting for Kennedy, of course. But the question that I have, and I guess, Fergus, you're going to be stuck with this. This is why we're so proud of you. We know you're going to handle it. Is why do you think that black constituency has drifted away from the party of Lincoln and Eisenhower, and come to the Democratic Party and has not strayed from there, with a few exceptions like Herman Cain. You know. But why do you think that is, and what is Romney doing to lure black voters back into the fold?
So Lynn and Fergus were directed to that.
I will say that I think, generally speaking, the left tends to look at voters as being members of groups and thinking that everybody in that group thinks similarly, and that Republicans or conservatives typically see people as individuals. And I think, and micro-targeting brings this into a way that both the left and the right can start to try to segment different audiences that previously might have been thought as monolithic in their thinking, and start to say, okay, where do we get the portion of the vote that we need out of different kinds of constituencies? And the Romney organization and most conservatives would probably say, look, we believe in policies that create economic opportunity for everyone. We're not going after the women's vote specifically. We're looking for people who are interested in economic opportunity, whether they happen to be men, women, or whatever their racial background is.
All right. You guys don't have to answer all the questions. That's fine. Yes, up here.
Hi, Mark Brimhall Vargas, class of 1992, the best class of the Kennedy School. My question is about sort of the bases of each candidate. I have a concern coming from the Kennedy School that facts are in fact important, and I have observed in politics that facts have become increasingly optional. And so, I'll put it out there that I think that there's a serious concern, particularly in the Republican Party, that the base is not concerned with facts. And so to what extent do you think Governor Romney or even Obama, there are some left sort of perspectives that also are not concerned with facts, where appeasing to sort of these bases is actually going to compromise the election in one way or another, because important facts actually have to be addressed at some point, but to get elected, you sort of have to ignore them. And I'm just wondering what you think about that.
There was actually a kind of scary moment in the primary campaign where Governor Romney's team admittedly sliced and diced comments that the president had made in New Hampshire 4 years earlier for an ad that perpetuated the Romney candidacy and attacked the Obama presidency. And Eric Fernstrom, the governor's communications director, now his senior advisor, came out and said, yeah, we did it, but it's up for you guys to call us out on it. So as somebody in the media, I take that very seriously, and it also speaks a little bit to what we've seen since '08, especially on the Republican side. There's almost been an anti-intellectualism sweeping into the political debate, where if you know too much about global warming, you become irrelevant or mocked or ridiculed, and the factual basis for a lot of debate gets pushed aside, and rhetoric takes over. And I'm sure Stephanie has something to say on that, and that will be one of the battlegrounds going forward, that when you look at charts and indexes and facts about when the economy bottomed out or how many jobs have been added in, it differs from the narrative that you hear come from a lot of the candidates.
It's bad for our civic life.
Yes. I mean, I will say, we're up with advertising now, but we went up with online advertising many, many months ago and just never really told anybody about it. The most popular ad that we have, it's on air now, but it was incredibly popular online, is a simple chart that shows what was happening with jobs in the months coming up to the presidential election in 2008, what happened with jobs in the first 6 months of this administration, and then what's happened with jobs once our policies kicked into place. There's no spin on it. It's just simple facts. It's a bar chart. That's it. No commentary, not attached to any of our policies, and that is the most popular piece of advertising material that we have out there today, because people are looking for, they don't want to hear all the spin. They don't want to hear, I could cite off some facts about Romney's record, which 90% of it would be true. But that last 10% you don't want to hear. That's not what voters are looking for. They're looking for very straightforward information. They just want the facts. And we started this online program called the Truth Team, which really is very basic information about the president's record, about what they're saying about the president's record to knock down some of the misinformation, and then to talk about Mitt Romney's record. Now, I'm sure there are things on the Romney record that the Romney campaign would take issue with. But it's meant to be no spin on the ball, just pure information out there, and let people decide. The other, I won't filibuster the entire answer, but the other thing that is a problem with controlling facts and ensuring that there is some truth to what's being said out there is really the rise of the super PACs, because they're wholly unaccountable. We can put a super PAC ad will go up. It will be a bunch of crap about the president's record. We'll work with independent fact checkers to get people to knock it down. And whether it's the Washington Post or PolitiFact or all of these independent fact checkers will say, the so-and-so ad is not true, gets 5 Pinocchios. They don't care. The ad's up. No one's challenging. For us to legally challenge them to take that ad down takes months. By then, the damage is done. So the rise of the super PACs is making it more and more difficult to ensure that the discourse that we're having is somehow based in truth.
Fergus, you want to defend the Republican Party here? I don't want,
It wasn't an attack there worthy of rising to. So okay. We've got other people having
Lynn.
I just have a quick point because we have a lot of questions. At a certain point in the campaign, I'm guessing if it's a domestic economy issue, and this has been framed pretty simply by both campaigns by now, especially Romney in his Pennsylvania speech, there's certain data that am I employed? Is my job in jeopardy? Has my salary been cut? Have I been furloughed? If I have some money, can I get a loan to buy a house? Even if we all know the market is depressed, but that's opportunities for a lot of people to buy. Now, even in a depressed market, people want to sell. Can I sell my house? Oh, I can't because the bank's not lending, or people have too high a bar. So there will be a bit of a personal application when you talk about some domestic stuff. I want to retire. I want to sell the house. I don't care if I take a hit. If you can't do that. So I think these are other elements that will come into play too, as a personal story that people have. If you're truly a swing voter, if you truly don't know where you stand, then you might have a set of personal data points. And by the way, in this room, how many people are truly undecided about their presidential preference right now?
Both of you.
Now, hold on. Okay, so no one. So this means everything we're saying kind of isn't for you.
So the cameras, that was 2 people if you're watching this at home.
So
I really like coming here.
No persuadables.
Lynn's story reminded me of going back to the '80 election when Ronald Reagan said, a recession is when your neighbor loses his job, a depression is when you lose your job, and I'm going to say it for all of you who are here, and a recovery was Jimmy Carter losing his job. For the one Republican in the audience.
Hi, I'm Mary Zupkis. I'm a member of the class of 2002. I'm a healthcare provider here in the state of Massachusetts, and I'm a beloved friend of Fergus. And my question is, Fergus, do you believe that Governor Romney made a huge tactical error when he moved so far away from the health care initiative that he, and I think no Democratic governor could have done what he did here in the state of Massachusetts? As a loyal Democrat, my life has changed because of that. As a small business operator, it's made things better for us. We're watching robust change happen here within the state. The legislature yesterday has filed both the state Senate and House bills, which will really move us to the front of the nation once again. And President Obama is now going to be the recipient of that and has made an incredible difference in terms of health care. Why did Mitt Romney run away from something that he did such a good job for?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mary. And understand that party primaries are like the Hunger Games minus the bow and arrow and the love story, unless it's the John Edwards presidential campaign. That is to say, one person comes out of it alive, and the health care issue for Mitt Romney was probably a political liability in the primaries. I genuinely believe it's now becoming a political plus for him in this case. Look, the Republican health care plan cannot be, do not get hurt and do not get sick. That's not acceptable to the American people. So he has the credibility. he has the credibility to say, look, I've tried to do something on this very complicated, very difficult issue, and he can have that conversation with those swing voters for whom, again, they are concerned about health care. It's a very serious and a very personal issue for so many people. Affordability, we all know the challenges with it. So it's now, I think, a political opportunity for him to be starting to talk about, look, we may disagree about aspects of this, but I've tried to do something positive on this. That's something that a lot of other Republicans wouldn't be able to say.
A little late.
Dana, and let's continue to do short questions. Dana. Or let me start doing short questions. Dana.
Dana Sherman, a mid-career, 1992, from Los Angeles, California. My question is this. What really determines how people vote? Is it, I mean, other than the economy, is it international affairs? Is it how tall they are? Is it whether or not they shave before the debate? I mean, what is it that, you know, if you're trying to run a campaign, what is it that you're going to do to get people to vote for your candidate? What do they fundamentally care about? How do you get people to change their minds, including some of the people in this room?
Well, I'll take that.
Yeah, this
Please
might be one that
jump in.
everybody want to
Yeah,
comment on.
I think that there are very few single-issue voters out there. So when we talk about slicing, dicing the electorate, there is no one issue that drives a certain segment of voters. It's an overall picture that you paint of your candidate. Primarily, it's about a future-looking vision of where is this guy or this woman going to take me personally and the country over the course of his or her presidency. And it's that future-looking vision that it's really up to a candidate to communicate. The other thing that I would say is that the ability for a voter to know that you get them, that you understand what they're going through is critical. And many people call that many different things. Some people call it a character test. Some people call it a likability test. But at the end of the day, they just want to know that you understand what they're going through in their daily lives. So that is a critical piece of how people vote. So it's that future-looking vision. Where is this man or woman going to be taking me, my family, but also the country? And do they understand what I'm going through? It's really as simple as that. And you can overthink in a million different ways, but it's human nature.
Anybody want to add anything to that? Or is that pretty?
I'd just say, people obviously will go through this whole campaign, and there'll be some gut check issues that they look at and try and decide with whom they align. But I go back to the 2004 campaign, where you have a president with an economy that's failing, you have him in a war that a lot of people oppose, you have him squared up against a candidate who actually went to Vietnam and fought in a war versus somebody that stayed home and patrolled the Gulf of Mexico for the National Guard. And yet, over the course of that campaign, you had George Bush emerge as the victor over John Kerry. Even after Kerry, I think, by all indexes, beat him in 3 presidential debates. And it was, to my mind, because ultimately more people felt comfortable with George Bush. That gets to that likability part. And I think that plays a huge role in every election that I've seen, especially at the presidential level. And that's why you see some of the push on this Cranbrook story this week.
For those who don't know what that is.
This is this story that the Washington Post had where it talked about Mitt Romney leading a group of students back in high school and cutting a gay person's hair off, a classmate's hair off. And that was why Mitt Romney was out there immediately the next morning, adding an interview to his schedule to try and address this head on. And that's, to me, that has a huge and disproportionate influence over the way people will finally vote when they get in the ballot box.
Yes, Penelope.
Penelope Salmons, mid-career, 2007. In the 90s, I had won a grant by the Kellogg Foundation and studied healthcare reform. So this is the question, and I think many of those facts have not changed. If anything, they've gotten worse. And it has to do with why has not the messaging and the facts have not emerged. In fact, there is no free lunch. The charitable healthcare delivery that providers are having to absorb, the cost shifting. For every dollar spent, to handle the chronic conditions. And by the way, the 80-20% rule, 80% of the cost is spent on the 20% of the individuals with chronic conditions. And for every dollar spent on the preventative maintenance side, prevents $12 spent in the tertiary setting. All this has not emerged. And I'm also equally conflicted by the lack of public option. What will prevent the HMOs from continuing to raising the cost?
Can you wrap?
And those are the two: the messaging and the absence of the
public option.
Of the public
payer.
option, you know, which
Perfect.
will only make things worse, as it has since the 90s.
May I say something?
Yeah, Lynn.
That has been, I don't know what you expect from a campaign, but at certain points I think we know that wasn't the option. The time had passed. The next thing actually is that we're waiting for when it comes to any option is what the Supreme Court is going to do. And I think if we're looking at a game changer in a campaign, that will be the thing I would look for more than anything else that you mentioned. If we're talking in the context today of the political race between Mitt Romney and Barack Obama.
Yes, up here.
Hi, Rosemary Day, MPP 92. So I'm going to follow up. All right. I'm going to follow up on the healthcare question because I have a question for Stephanie. Obviously, there's lots of ironies about Romney care or Obamacare, whatever you want to call it. And I'll just put my cards on the table. I'm a huge fan of health reform. Helped do it in Massachusetts under Romney, and then carrying forward national health reform. In any case, I don't feel like the messaging has been sufficient from the president's side to really, because with the consistent polling, it seems that people don't fully understand the law and all the great things it would do for them, and so it continues to be not popular enough. And so I'm just wondering how the campaign's addressing that. And then a question for both Stephanie and Fergus is kind of how are you preparing for the aftermath of whichever way the Supreme Court goes?
Let me take that first part. In terms of the messaging around the president's health reform law, this is something that I've looked at a lot. And, you know, I think there's a couple of things. The way the bill was passed was incredibly damaging to the reputation of it coming out. You know, the emphasis on transparency that the administration had put coming into the White House wasn't there through the passage of the law. You know, it was the administration working with Congress, and, you know, there's only so much you can control. There were nasty debates over whether there should be a public option. There were nasty debates over, you know, we thought Republicans were going to work with us on it, which is why, you know, if you remember, God, it's 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago, that, you know, that critical summer when those first town halls broke out, we were waiting for Republicans to get back to us on whether they were going to work on a deal. They ended up just walking away. Much of the Affordable Care Act, like it or not, is really built on Republican ideas. It's built on the private insurance system. It's built on accountability. It's built on transparency. It's built on the free market. And people may disagree with that. I can hear Fergus getting ready. But you know, not having a partner in Congress, but having that partner, that potential partner, stretch this out over the course of a whole summer so that organizations on the ground could get organized to fight against it was incredibly damaging to us. And you know, there were lots of mistakes made in the communications of it throughout the course of developing the legislation. Coming out of it, there was an effort to communicate how the law was going to help people, to break it down in very simple terms. You know, we don't need to be talking about the complexity of exchanges to average Americans across the country. That's not what they care about. They want to know if their price is going to go up. They want to know if their insurance is going to be there when they need it. And they want to know if their kid can be covered, whether they have a pre-existing condition or if they're graduating from college and can't get health care on their own. Very simple things. So we broke it down, and we actually, you know, moved pretty aggressively to communicate on it. Now, a complication. We passed the law just as we were coming into the 2010 midterm elections, where $100 million was spent after the law passed to tear down the law and use it against Democrats in the 2010 elections, and it was effective. It was really effective. All of, you know, this is where Karl Rove really built Crossroads. It's where the Koch brothers started to get involved. And that stuff matters. That's not an excuse. I'm not saying that we deserve great credit for our communications abilities on the healthcare law, but I'm just telling you what we were up against too. Now, on the campaign side, we do communicate the healthcare law in a very aggressive way as one of the president's greatest accomplishments. You know, after 70 years of trying, and I worked on healthcare for most of my career because I worked for Ted Kennedy for many years. After 70 years of trying, the president finally got it done, and people are starting to see the benefits of it. You know, like I said, kids up until the age of 26 can now stay on their parents' health care plan. That's significant when you're starting out. 2.5 million kids are now have health care because of that. Kids can no longer be discriminated against if you have a pre-existing condition. There are millions of kids benefiting from that. People are about to get rebates in the mail. If your insurance company didn't spend 80% of your premium dollar on your health care, you're going to get a rebate. That's billions of dollars that are going to go out this summer, which is a real significant step in controlling the cost of health care. There's now transparency. Insurance companies have to tell you how they're spending your dollars. And if your premium is going up over 10%, they have to prove to you why that's necessary. And then you can appeal it. So, you know, all of that stuff is being communicated on the campaign. We just finished a significant effort over the course of March where we communicated with 1 million women. Because women, this is not slice and dicing. This is reality. Women make the healthcare decisions in their families. We know that. And so we communicated with 1 million women over the course of a month to give them very basic information. Again, no spin on the ball. In many ways, they didn't even know this was coming from a campaign. It wasn't political information. It was pure facts about what the healthcare law would do. And we saw those women's opinions change over the course of 1 month with just a limited amount of information that they were getting. So I think that, you know, public opinion remains static on this. In all of the polls out there, if you ask head-to-head, do you approve or disapprove of the healthcare law, we lose every time. But if you ask, do you approve of the provision of ensuring kids can't be discriminated against, hands down winner. Do you approve of preventing insurance companies from dropping you when you get sick, hands down winner. So those are the things over the course of this campaign that you're going to be hearing. And those are the things, you know, on to the next question on what happens with the Supreme Court, and then I'll turn it over to Fergus. But I will, for him to discount everything I just said, I will say that, you know, we do believe we're going to win in the Supreme Court. We believe if you look at what happened in the lower courts, very conservative judges upheld the law, including, you know, Reagan and Bush appointees. Judge Silverman in D.C. is a perfect example. He's rarely on the side of this administration on these critical issues, and he upheld the president's health care law. What happens if it gets knocked down? No one really knows in terms of public opinion or how it impacts the election. I will say June is a long time. Between June and November is an eternity in election. So anybody who's predicting what's going to happen in November is probably not giving you accurate information. I can't give you accurate information right now. Yeah. So,
Fergus,
and just real briefly, if you or somebody you love is in need of emergency health care, you do not tend to look at this issue through an ideological lens. I was a bit player in a U.S. Supreme Court case a year ago on another topic. I got a seat for it. The court itself is about the size of this forum, minus any of the bleachers. It is tiny. It's really cool. If you ever have an opportunity to see a case argued, I encourage you to do it. It's very cool to do. I think the most likely outcome is some kind of split decision, mixed results, neither upholding nor turning down the entire law, in which case it will, as Lynn points out, be a major issue. And that's where, to get to Mary's question, I think Mitt Romney will at least have the credibility that so many other Republicans will lack to have a real discussion, because it's going to be a major issue in the campaign moving forward.
I'm going to be the bad guy as a moderator. We're going to have to make this the last question. Otherwise, you guys will be way off schedule for the rest of your activities. So make it a good one.
Thank you.
No pressure.
Senga Singamalay, class of 2002. Hello, Fergus.
Hello, Senga.
As an international student in 2002, I was trying to learn and understand U.S. politics. And I carried with me a statement you made in explaining that to me 10 years ago. And that was, both parties share the Constitution, and the Republicans are for life and liberty, and the Democrats are for happiness. And I have carried with me, in looking at every issue in the US, I have looked at it in that broad philosophical framework. Do you still carry that framework with you? And if so, please look at two issues, education and immigration, in that philosophical framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Senga. Very, very briefly.
Great question.
Yeah. I like putting the alum on the spot for the last question, so thank you. Go ahead.
So the question is, what is the difference between Republicans and Democrats? And my answer is that Democrats think that Republicans think that the preamble to the Constitution says that everyone has a right to life. Republicans believe that it says everyone has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that Democrats believe that it says everyone has a right to life, liberty, and happiness. That one sees it as something that maybe you'll achieve and maybe you won't, and the other says if you aren't happy, we in government will do what we can using the power and resources of government to make you happy. Even if and that's where all the other differences
He's
come.
on the stage, he can say it.
So, Senga, you asked about immigration, and what was the other part? Education? Well, let me take the immigration question because this is where I was so disappointed in Mitt Romney. And this is where primary politics come into play, which is an issue which can be so easily distorted, plays to the base. And Romney handled that issue, I think, very poorly and in a way that he deserves to be hurt in some way politically in the general election. Look, Republicans ought to be talking about opportunity and how it should be easier for the world's most talented, motivated people to come to America and be here legally in some capacity, whether citizenship can be a separate issue. We ought to be talking about job creators and people at this university and universities across the country who are getting advanced degrees who ought to have an opportunity to stay here and be successful and to pursue happiness in a way that probably is going to create jobs. And that's my biggest disappointment with Mitt Romney to this point. And so I'll stop there because there are Republicans who believe that it would be helpful if we had more talented, successful people like Senga who are here. Thank you.
So I know we could have a lot more questions and the dialogue could go on a lot more, but please join me in thanking this great panel. All right, we got to do some maneuvering around on the stage and get you set up for the next session. Paige says in 10 minutes, because we got a little bit of a late start, so we got a little bit of a late end. But in 10 minutes, we'll start the next session, which will be right here. So don't go very far.